Hi, welcome to Virtualized Geeks Tech Talk episode number 37. This is Keith Townsend from virtualizedgeek.com. And I brought a prop to talk about this week's topic, which is hyper-convergence. So for those of you who don't know, hyper-convergence is this concept where we take IT infrastructure components and combine them into one unit. So, if you're looking at software-defined networking, storage arrays, and all these concepts that we're looking at, such as Nutanix's solutions that take 2U servers, combine that with a bunch of storage, make them basically blocks that you can stack on top of one another. The ideal is that you can converge your hardware. So if you take advanced concepts like software-defined networking, these storage blocks and compute blocks, you can build in complete software-defined infrastructures without any traditional components like storage arrays or even physical networking equipment. That's, kind of oversimplifying it, but more or less that's the ideal of hyperconvergence. So in theory, on surface, for those of us who aren't as seasoned as others, you might think, that makes sense. But I brought a prop to talk about some of the challenges of hyperconvergence. This thing is not a phone. A lot of you guys might have instantly recognized it. It's a HP iPack, not an iPhone iPad, but an HP iPack. It was a PDA circa 8 years ago, and specifically it's my wife's PDA, and it's a really interesting story behind why I still have it, but we'll get to that. So the ideal of traditional PDAs, you have an iPhone-like device that the only thing that it does was the PDA functionality. So you can sideload applications onto it. You can use it to take notes. Was even a mediocre media player, which kind of brings us to the topic of convergence. So my wife had her HP iPack, and she was pretty happy with it. She had an iPack, she had an iPad, she had a digital camera. Life was good. Then the iPhone came around. My wife is what over on the TWIT network, over Leo Ports network, they call a norm. She's a normal user. She doesn't work in IT. She'd probably be my nightmare end user if I had to support her in an enterprise section. She fought me tooth and nail when the iPhone came out on giving this thing up. I bought her an iPhone. She liked it, made sense to her, but it was missing some critical features for her, which didn't allow her to completely leave the iPad behind. One of which the original iPhone didn't support. There was no app store, so obviously that was a short failing. It's funny. She talked about the availability of applications on the iPhone before the iTunes application store came out, the App Store came available. But more importantly, she talked about practical things. If she gets a phone call, she's not a Bluetooth user. If she gets a phone call, she can't take her PDA out and then kind of multitask and look at her phone or not look at her phone, but talk on the phone and do things on her PDA. And then as the iPhone matured, she still had challenges in giving up things such as her point and shoot camera. So she has both a point and shoot camera and a digital SLR. And she also has kind of a camcorder that she uses to take videos at special events. Talking with her, I'm trying to understand the rationale on not giving up certain, single purpose devices. So one of the devices was her GoPro-like camera. She had a Kodak camcorder that shot 1080p video that she used specifically to take the kids' graduation, vacations, that type of thing. And I said, well, you know what? The iPhone does 1080p video, 720p and 1080p now. Why do you need a separate device to take video? Or why do you need a separate point and shoot camera to take point and shoot pictures? And she said, you know what? The iPhone does a decent job at both of those. It's a decent camcorder. It's a decent point and shoot camera, but it's not a great point and shoot camera. So, for 80% of the market, it may cover the needs for point and shoot, may cover the needs for digital video, but for her, it didn't cover her needs for dedicated use for specific tasks. So she wanted high quality video, and she wanted high quality photos that she could have a bit more control over, and she wanted the features of a point and shoot camera. Makes sense. You know what? I can get with the ideal. For 80% of the market, the iPhone makes a great point and shoot camera. For 80% of the market, the iPhone makes a great PDA. For 80% of the market, the iPhone makes a great digital camera. However, for that 20% use case is not going to go away ever, if anytime soon. The iPhone will always be just decent versus purpose-driven devices. So, bringing it back to the conversation about infrastructure. So when you look at hyper-converged solutions like Nutanix's solution and a slew of other companies that are now offering converged infrastructure, and we'll focus the conversation around SAN storage. I think it's one of the easiest conversations. So, the value proposition of Nutanix is pretty straightforward. If you have a software-defined, I'll use the word software-defined infrastructure, where you're, or better yet, I'll use my coin that I termed a few weeks ago. If you have a virtual first infrastructure where you're virtualizing everything, your ERP, your CRM, your file and print, everything is virtual. Your VDI is actually a great use case for converged hyper-converged infrastructure. If you're doing those things, then Nutanix and hyperconvergence makes sense. You have your compute, you have your storage, all in one unit, and you, as you need to expand either compute or storage, you just add additional blocks, and it serves your purposes fairly well, performance-wise, speeds and feeds. Nutanix will give you, or hyperconverged will give you the type of performance you need for these type of workloads. But let's think about just outside of kind of the virtual first infrastructure. Most of us live in a world where we have to deal with legacy equipment. So if you have to do HPUX or Unix and general systems that are still physical, or you're supporting kind of a non-x86 type workload. Believe it or not, there's an awful lot of Itanium still out there running on HP Itanium blades, and you need to provision storage to those things. That hyper-converged solution really doesn't fit that use case very well. Or if you're in a world where everything isn't virtual first in general, you have a bunch of Windows workloads that are physical workloads for whatever reason. It just didn't make economic sense to virtualize it, and you don't need the compute, you don't need the storage along with the compute combined in one platform. A blade serves a traditional blade serves your purposes extremely well. Then kind of taking the Nutanix and hyper-converged metaphor and putting it into that type of data center really doesn't make sense. It's, it goes to our iPhone versus or smartphone versus PDA argument, or smartphone versus dedicated point and shoot camera. When you have specific use cases when it comes to your infrastructure, hyper-converged may not be the solution for you. But for 80% of the market, I think eventually it will be a solution. That's why we see VMware and EMC pushing solutions such as vSAN and Scale.io onto the industry, because there will be a inflection point where 80% of the market will look at it and say, you know what, the only reason why I have a SAN is to support my virtualized environment or to support these specific use cases. So hyper-converged infrastructure makes sense for 80% of the market, and for 20% of the market, we're fine with our iPad. Well, thanks for tuning in for this episode of Virtualized Geeks Tech Talk. Talk to you next time around.